Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition, the 1st for June, for the CrowCast weekend wrap. Another rollercoaster ride for us this week, Crows fans. Unfortunately, not getting the job done in the Northern Territory after a bright start. Here to talk all about it, as usual, is Macca. How you going, mate?
Oh, I've had a busy weekend, mate, socially, and very disappointed with the game. Very disappointed.
Yeah, it was a bit disappointing. It was a good opportunity for us just to steal a bit of a march over the pack going for 7th and 8th spots. But we couldn't get the job done, and that's a bit of a pity. As always, thanks to everyone who's joining us on YouTube and on Discord. And also, as always, Macca, if anyone on Discord wants to have a chat, have their opinions on air, then please raise your hand and we'd be happy to have you on. Mate, a pretty rough trip as it turns out. Not only did we blow a 35-point lead, but we also had Tom Doedee blowing out his other knee.
Yeah, very interesting that, because, he's got, well, it's very heavily rumoured that he might be looking around elsewhere at the end of the year. And it's sort of, it depends what he's done. If it's a lateral,
it's an ACL. It's an ACL.
Oh shit! Well, an ACL, that means that's 12 months out. That might really. Well, it might not only ruin his plans, but it will. I think we will double down trying to get Redmond.
Well, possibly, but everything that I've heard says that Redmond isn't interested in coming home, so I could be wrong, and it's only what I've heard, but he's for all the media speculation, what I've heard is that it's not a thing.
I think with enough dollars it could be, and seriously, and I think that we with Doedee out now, I mean, it does give Worrell a good opportunity, there's no doubt about that, but I would like to see Hinge up on the wing rather than in the back line, and that means that we still needed somebody down back. And I think that was part of the reason that we went adrift once Doedee went out. If for example, we brought 2 players back and they had to come in, there's no doubt about that. So 2 players had to go out. But the player I would have put out was Scholl, and put Hinge onto the wing, which would have given us, I think, more strength. And as it turned out, in the end, with an injury, more versatility.
Well, did Brodie Smith have to come back in?
Well, I think his form had been pretty good the week before, so probably he did. I know that you're not a great Smith fan, but I think his form has been reasonably good so far, and I think even you praised him probably the week that before for him actually raising his eyes and looking for somebody to pass to for a change.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't add much as far as I'm concerned. It was as if we forgot that they had Casbolt, because we picked 2 tools for Lukosius and King. We didn't really. Even Tom Doedee was far too short for Lukosius. I don't think we had a very good matchup for Lukosius at all, and that's who I would have put Worrell on. I just don't think we were balanced up forward, to be honest with you.
You mean down back?
Down back, yeah.
Yeah. Well, they also had another tool. What's the name of that bloke that used to? Great big hunk of a bloke that never used to do much.
Casbolt.
Casbolt, yeah.
Yeah, that's who I said.
They actually had 3 tools down there. They had King, Casbolt.
That's what I said. That's what I just said.
Sorry, I didn't hear you say 3. But yeah.
I said it's as if we forgot they had Casbolt.
Oh, my apologies. Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think we selected correctly. I think I would have left Josh Worrell in. I Mitch Hinge he didn't look as if he'd actually fully recovered. To be perfectly frank with you, he had a nothing sort of a game, and I know there's the mandatory 12 days or whatever it is, but to me, he didn't seem quite right, to be honest.
You might be right, but I thought we had a lot of them as the heat took its toll on them that looked like they weren't quite right. I mean, we went from, it was interesting because, our first quarter was very good and the first half of the second quarter was very good. And at that stage, I noticed at the first quarter that our players' arms and their jerseys were still reasonably dry and they weren't absolutely slopping wet. But halfway through the second quarter, I noticed that their arms looked like they'd been dumped into a bathtub and their jerseys started to get wet. And I think that not just him, I just think a lot of our players just didn't handle those conditions thing. I mean, they started well, but I don't think they maintained it.
Did we make a mistake by not going up there and spending a week up there, Mac, or a few days?
A massive mistake, Fiend. Massive mistake. Why would you give your opposition, who had already been up there for about 4 days before that, why would you give them that 11-day start? Yep. Absolutely stupid.
It seems to me that we didn't learn from our experience in against GWS, and I know it was far hotter, but it was certainly oppressive humidity in Darwin of an evening, and it was apparently quite a mild night, but the humidity did get up, as you say, sort of as the game went on, and it was quite noticeable. And as the commentators pointed out, Gold Coast reverted to wet weather football, the hustle and bustle style of football, much sooner than we did. And that is a general understanding of the conditions, and I don't think we understood the conditions, and we continued to try and play dry weather football for far too long before we cottoned on to the fact that wasn't going to work. And I think that was integral to Gold Coast getting on top, towards the back end of the second quarter and all the way through the third, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think it just became more slippery and slippery as the game went on. And a very good example was that Pedler was going to have a kick at one stage, and you sort of balance yourself with one arm and you guide the ball down with the other. And the ball's just shot out of his hand sideways because it was so wet. And what what Gold Coast did is they never tried to go zigzagging down the ground. They just always kicked directly down the ground. In other words, the shortest way to home is straight. And they were quite happy to kick it to a contest all the time if necessary. Whereas we tried to be cute and tried to play the game that we normally play. And, the conditions just weren't convenient for that. They just didn't allow for it.
Well, it was interesting because it seemed that in the first half, in particular, we played off the ball, we played behind the ball, and we were happy to allow the fumbly sort of, in tight kind of stuff, and then sort of mop up and get it out the back of the contest and progress forward that way. But as Gold Coast adapted to the way they were playing, and as Matty Rowell in particular started to become a bit of a force, and as Witts got on top and a few others, they were just pushing through that sort of, I guess, that defensive side and getting through us, and then it was opening up for them.
Yeah, and I thought Rob O'Brien, he actually got thrashed. That's only one word for it. He got thrashed by Witts. Witts is a very, very tall guy, and I've pointed out many times that O'Brien can bullock his way against like the Nankervis type of player, but once he's up against that very tall type of player with long arms, he's just not in business at all. And he was totally outranked.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we'll go through individuals later as we always do, but Riley O'Brien, out of 23 or 25 taps, 3 to advantage, Macca.
Well, he's improved.
I mean, Jared Witts out of, let me have a look here, I just had it up before. Hitouts to advantage. Let's have a look. So Jared Witts had right, Jared.
He had 48 hitouts to 28.
Yes, hitouts to advantage 14 from 48, so 29% hitout to advantage. Riley O'Brien 3 from 28, which is a 10% hitout to advantage. You may as well not have a ruckman winning the tap.
Exactly. I think you better off have another midfielder and just wait till the ball comes down.
Well, this is it, and look, I think it's gone beyond a idiosyncrasy now. I think it's an issue, and I think it's a combination, as we've said all along, of O'Brien's inability to adapt or direct his taps to areas other than where he's comfortable. But I think it's also a situation where we're just not setting up right. It's like we're setting up for the ruckman we want rather than the ruckman that we've got, Macca.
Absolutely. And then look, we should always be setting up for a losing ruck. There's no doubt about that. We should be, and Witts is if you study the tapes, you'd find that Witts has got his favourite spots to hit it to, but he's unlike Rob. It's got probably about 4 or 5 of them. So, but what you try and do is you try and man up in the positions where he mostly hits it to, and at least you can make a contest. But with Rao was just ploughing through as if nobody was there, and Anderson, he skirts very well, and if Rao gets it or somebody else gets it, because that young lad that they've got, he's very, very good too.
Humphrey,
number 19. For a first year play, he's outstanding. He really is he's a young bull. He's going to be a very, very good player. And they would shoot the ball out to Anderson, and Anderson, that's how he loves it, like that. And we got slaughtered in the middle. We got slaughtered around the packs. We lost the clearances badly.
Yeah, particularly in the middle. The amount of times there was no one hitting Riley's hit zone at the fall of the ball in centre bounce contests, except for a red Guernsey, was ridiculous during that stretch. And something's got to change around there. One thing that I have noticed, Macca, is that just as the season has progressed and we've become, in contention for a top 8 spot, we are less inclined to run our younger players through centre bounce attendances. We are more and more seeing Laird, Dawson, Sloane, Keys through that. We get cameos from some of the others, but it seems to me that as the closer we've come to being in contention, the more we've actually gone back to the well in terms of our old players. Luke Pedler, for example, had 4 centre clearances. I think he had 6 or 7 centre bounce attendances. He's an absolute beast. He had more centre clearances than any of the rest of us. Sloane had 2, Laird had 2, Keys had 2. Luke Pedler is an absolute bull, and I know that he hasn't got an engine yet, but we've got to work out a way to get him at more CBAs, even if he does the old, Malcolm Blight trick of taking the centre bounces and then drifting forward, and we have someone else coming up off the half-forward flank to actually run the midfield. We need to get him involved more because he's a clearance king.
I was actually going to make that very point that you did, that I know he hasn't got an engine to run all over the ground, but I think he should be at every CBA, and as you say, then drift back into the forward line after that. His percentage, I think you said he attended 6 and cleared 4. I think that's what you said.
7 for 4. 7 attendances for 4 clearances when you've got Rowell and Anderson in there. Like, that's for a kid, that's amazing.
Yeah. And, I think it's poor coaching, actually, not to really go along the lines that you just suggested, because, as you said, as we've been going along, it is gravitating towards the Laird, Dawson, Keys, Sloane situation, and the younger blokes are getting less and less a look in there.
Yeah, and of course, having Keys on Rao when Rao touched up Laird, particularly from about a third of the way through the second quarter, Benny Keys is also becoming a big problem because his skills under normal circumstances are questionable, but in those conditions they were horrific. And for all the hustle and bustle, we get no value out of Ben Keys. And it's, again, a situation where does he become just nothing more than a shutdown player, Macca? Because offensively, he's becoming a liability.
I think that's a little bit harsh. To say it's a liability, because he and I don't quite understand the coaching here, because he was on Rao for the first half and he kept Rao very quiet. But they moved him off of Rao in the second half, which I don't understand for one moment.
No, they didn't.
They didn't? I thought that they did.
No.
Well, he had a very good first half on him. I thought the commentator said that he'd been moved off of Rao onto Anderson.
I think there was a period in the third quarter, I think, where he came off him, and that's where Rao got a few. But Keys was on him for most of the second half. Yeah,
well, I don't know. I thought that the one thing I'll say about Keys, he's not the tidiest player and he's not the neatest, but the one thing I do like about him, he does give 100%, and he will run all day. And
yeah, but Nebby Henry gives 100%. There's a lot of players that give 100% that are trash, Macca.
No, I understand what you're saying, but at this stage, and I think in time he'll be forced out of the side when some of the younger blokes develop and become stronger and take that place. But at the moment, I don't think there's anybody that can be called a tagger that could take his place.
Well, no, but that's what I mean. That's, we've got to start thinking about how we use him. But as a mainstay centre bounce attendee, it's, again, with Laird and Sloan and him and Dawes running most of the CBAs, it's not a dynamic midfield. They hang all over Dawson because he knows that he's our outlet. And you don't see enough of Rankin, you don't see enough of Rochelle, you don't see enough of Luke Pedley, you don't see enough of Jake Saligo when he's there. We've got options, and we just don't seem to be versatile enough through the midfield. And when a team like Gold Coast with a couple of, and Rao's in a real purple patch of form, we don't seem to be able to go with them, because let's not forget that kind of midfield setup that we had against Gold Coast. That's the setup that got us into this mess in the first place.
Yeah, look, I do understand what you're saying, mate. But at the moment, I just don't think. Well, we haven't. We're far from the complete side at the moment, and we've got two or three players in the side that really wouldn't be in there if we had a choice. And so
then I would question throwing big bucks at Redmond when that's not a primary need.
Well, if 2 days are going to be out all next year, it could be a primary need.
We've got 37 halfback flankers, Mac. We do not need Redmond. We need midfielders. We need a midfielder.
Oh, look, I don't argue with that, but where are you going to get the midfielder from?
Well, somewhere. Like, we need to go hard at a midfielder. I mean, no one picked us for picking up Geordie Dawson until we did. We've got to go for a midfielder. We've got plenty of blokes that can play off halfback. We have got to go for a big, strong, dynamic midfielder. Have to. We just have to. And until we do, we do not. For all the, we've got Sandberry in the wings. We're still hopeful about Schoenberg coming back into it. We've got Saligo, we've got Pedler, we've got these young lads. They're all small, right? Of those, Sam Berry's a hustle and bustle. He's more or less a Roy Laird replacement. Luke Pedler is dynamic and can hit contests hard and all the rest of it, but doesn't really have an engine. And who knows, may not ever develop an engine. Maybe just doesn't genetically have the capacity to develop an engine for an AFL midfielder. Zach Taylor's small. Will Dowling's untried. There's a lot of ifs and buts about our midfield. And to me, when we get monstered by teams, it all happens in the midfield.
Yeah,
and Baxter, I'm not interested in developing players into midfielders. I want to get a midfielder. We cannot speculate on any sort of trading. It can't be, he might be good in the midfield. We have to get a midfielder.
There's not one ounce of argument about that. Gold Coast had the luxury that year of getting, had numbers pick 1 and 2, and they got Anderson and Rowell in the one draft, and that's, not that we're going to ever have that situation, but that's what we really need, that type of player in our midfield. Where you've got one that's a real bull, and that actually we could have that potentially that way in Pedler if he could get an engine. But we really need that other dynamic one that, which is like the really A-grade type of midfielder that will always be a clearance king.
Yeah. So, people in the chat, who is it? Well, I don't know who it is. But as I said, we didn't know we were going after Jordan Dawson until we did. It's not as if teams don't trade players. It's not as if players don't move mid-contract. Like, these things happen, and I would suggest that Reid and the match committee, the list management committee, I should say, if that's not their primary focus, then they're looking in the wrong directions.
Yeah, somebody makes a suggestion of Parrish from Essendon, and because he is a free agent at the end of the year. But I don't really think he's the type of midfielder we need, though, Fane. He'd be nice to have as the extra midfielder, the one that they shoot it out to, but we really need somebody that can really get it and get it to him.
Oh, I don't know about that, Mac. I think we've got getters. Sam Berry is a getter. Rory Laird is a getter. We've got plenty of grunt players. We do need Silk. We need another outlet to complement Geordie Dawson, because at the moment we're a one-trick pony.
Oh, and I thought Lairdy was down on form too.
Yeah, well, he only played, and we're eating into our round the ground, so we'll continue this in a second, but I did notice that Lairdy only played 74% time on ground, so I know he got pulled off the ground at one stage, and we could see that Nix was having a fair conversation with him.
It was, wasn't it?
So I'm not sure, but he got pants. He got pants in the midfield. He got beaten to just about every contest.
Well, one thing for sure, Nix wasn't praising him, not the way that the expression on Nix's face.
Well, I think Nix was unhappy with the endeavour of a lot of our players, to be honest with you. Anyway, look, as I mentioned in the chat in Discord, and we've got another healthy audience as usual, so thanks again for all your support for the live stream. If you want to have your say, then please put your hand up during the course of the stream and we will definitely get you on. Also, thanks to everyone who's joined us on YouTube. At the moment, we've got a nice, healthy building audience here on YouTube, so g'day to everyone who's watching and supporting on YouTube. If you are listening on demand, either via YouTube or iTunes or any other podcast platform that you might use, and you've got the opportunity to subscribe or give us a like or give us a review, then please do so. It does help our visibility on all those platforms. All right, Mac, and also, once again, I'm sporting the CrowCast hoodie, keeping me very warm, Macca. I noticed you've got your old standby. So one or two of you have bought a hoodie off the merch store, which is great. They're really good for winter, so get around it. All right, let's have a look around the grounds, Mac, because that's what we do. Let me have a look. All right. So it was a bit of a mixed bag this round. And on the Friday night, we had a pretty boring old game, I thought. And Melbourne predictably getting up by 17, 61-44.
I'm glad you said you thought it was boring. My comment is that it's a very pretty ordinary game to watch, actually. And what we were watching was an out of form Melbourne playing a not good enough Carlton. And
Yep.
I mean, it was 21 shots to 14, and the margin should have been much greater. And Melbourne didn't have Oliver playing, but still Petrarca and Viney still won the midfield. They have got a nice young player forward in Van Roy, and I reckon he's going to be a beauty long term being.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but not much else to say about the game. Boring as shit, and Melbourne too good. And well, I must say this about the coach for Carlton, and that's 5 losses on the trot, and their chances of playing in the 8 are shot now. And it'll be interesting whether they tolerate that or whether they give him another season. What do you think?
I think they have to, Macca, because I think at some stage they've got to stick with a coach.
It hasn't been their history.
No, it certainly hasn't, and I think, to their detriment. And you look at the successful coaches of recent years, not many of them have been successful straight off the bat or in their first couple of seasons. Hardwick, Chris Scott obviously was because he got gifted a bloody list, but Al Clarkson, Luke Beveridge, there's not a lot of coaches that hit the ground running in the AFL, and I think at some stage, Carlton just need to stick with the coach.
Maybe not this one though.
Who else then? Who else?
Well, there is a bloke that left Richmond.
Nah, there's not a chance in hell.
Look, I don't know who, but put it this way, I think that Boss was a pretty good assistant coach, and I think that's what he does. I don't think he's a good coach.
But on what do you base that though? I mean, let's not get bogged down in this. But people are too quick to criticise coaches. Yeah, but that's the players.
Yeah, but we're talking about players that are allegedly good players, and they're not really performing.
Well, that surely as a player, you're in charge of your own performance, aren't you?
Well, put it this way. In the business world, if a company goes shit house, it's the bloke at the top that gets it, even if it's the people letting him down. And to some degree, that's how it works in footy too. It may, Vossi might survive this season, but if they had another season like that, he would definitely be gone.
Yeah, this isn't business though. This is This is not. You're not answering to shareholders. You're not making a token decision. What you're actually doing is trying to get the best performance out of a group of players, and the onus is on the players. The players are the ones that take the field, and to me, they've got too many blokes that pick and choose when they want to go. To be honest with you.
Well, that's very much how they play. There's no doubt about that. I had that comment, that very comment.
I would suggest that it's more their list than the coach, to be honest with you. I think they've got too many holes in that list, and they've got too many downhill skiers, to be honest.
Well, you got I think Curno's a potential champion, and he only got 1 goal. Cripps, I thought, was bloody useless. I mean, these are big names. He was a Brownlow medalist, and I thought he was useless.
Yeah, but it's easy to lock down those players. Anyway, Port Adelaide having a comfortable in the end win against a gallant Hawthorn. Hawthorn, not many teams will kick 96 points and lose, Mac, particularly by 55 points, but that's what happened to Hawthorn.
Well, Port blitzkrieg Hawks in the first half, or first quarter even, 9-3 to 2-3 in the first quarter, and half time they were 82 points up. But the Port, Port always seem to get the situation where players that are vital for a team are out. No Sicily. Sicily has 40 clearances the week before. He's not there. And I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, Seamus Mitchell, who's been one of their young up-and-coming really good players. He was out too. He felt ill on the morning of the match. So, yeah, very much undermanned Hawthorn. But I thought they showed courage, at least they fought back halfway through the third quarter onwards, when at that stage I think there was some I think it was 90 something points down at that stage. So
Yeah.
look, at least they showed they have a little bit about them, but they're a long way off of it. Then from Port's point of view, Finlayson very good. Marshall was very good. They got 5 goals each, and of course the on-ballers, the Brothers and Roses, they were both outstanding. So, yeah, Port have got a very even squad at the moment.
You've got to take your hat off to Jeremy Finlayson. I mean, given what's going on in his personal life, and of course there was some a little bit of good news, although it was overplayed by the media somewhat, for his wife over the last week or two, but for him to have to endure that and also be seen as a bit of certainly an inconsistent player previously, he's putting together a fantastic year for Port Adelaide.
Beautiful summary, Dean, about a good guy. Well done.
And then we had a weird old match because the Eagles actually for a while there looked like the Eagles of old. Tim Kelly just getting up and about, and Elliot Yeo forgetting that he's 93 years old, and they put a few scares into the Collingwood camp, but in the end it was pretty easy. 10 goals to Collingwood, 120 to 57.
Yeah, look, it had phases in the game. Collingwood got men out to a 4-goal lead at quarter time, and then West Coast matched them and scored equally for the second and third quarters. But then the last quarter, then Collingwood went flying away again and made what looked like a contest at 3/4 time into a 10-goal thrashing. So the end result was there. Doedee, very nasty incident, I thought, Fiend. I think that's a 3 to 4 match suspension, in my opinion.
Yeah, you would think at least. Well, I mean, it goes to the MRO. It's 3 matches, so I dare say Collingwood won't see him until I think it turns out to be their second game after the bye, which includes us. So that'll be a little bit weakened Collingwood, although they got a bit of depth, so it shouldn't weaken them too much. It made me laugh a bit. Jordan Goey's Brownlow chances have been hit. It's like it was never a chance for the Brownlow.
I'm with you. He was no chance for it. You did mention West Coast. That there was a revival in Duggan, Kelly, Sheed, Witherden. They all had good games, but yeah, they're in a world of pain.
Yeah, it was good to see a little bit of fight from them, and I don't think it'll be they've had comfortable losses, this season, but we wouldn't want to come back, especially after what we saw was our recovery or lack thereof after the GWS game. We wouldn't want to come back half rat power against West Coast.
No, I totally agree.
Then we had an up and down game which ended up in Geelong's favour, 97 to 75, 22 points to the Cats in the end.
Yeah, didn't really see this one because of what the time it was on at, because it was at the same time as our game. But Geelong, the Dogs actually had 25 scoring shots to 22, and still lost by that 22 points. And just when you run through their best players, you can see that their midfield is very, very dominant. They really did do very, very well. But also that accentuates that they're weak at either end of the ground, in my opinion. They've got probably 5 or 6 midfielders which are of very good quality, but they haven't got much else anywhere else. That's their major problem. And I've got not much else to say about it because Geelong still had a lot of good players out too.
Yeah.
So it was good. It was good effort by Geelong, but the Bulldogs, it's just something wrong with them that they've got this really good midfield and they don't win.
Well, this is what I'm worried about because the Western Bulldogs, I think, would have suffered from playing in Darwin last week.
Good point.
And then, pardon me, an entertaining game, the Giants v Richmond, and Richmond getting up at the end by 6 points after leading for the majority of the game, I think, from memory. But the Giants putting on a good show to get back to draw even, and then a late goal sealed it for the Tags.
Yeah, this is my game of the round, actually, in terms of enjoyment. It just was a good game to watch and very high scoring point. In fact, the last 2 games of the round, They were both very high-scoring games, and they both got decided by a goal, and both got decided very late in the game, in the last dying seconds in the GWS Richmond game. They were very good to watch, and there was great momentum swings either way in both games. And I thoroughly enjoyed the game, and in some ways I was really hoping GWS would win the game, but Pickett got that winning goal with, was it 15 seconds to go or whatever it was?
Yeah, thereabouts.
Yeah. So, but as I said, a very good game to watch. And, Rewalt turned the clock back and he kicked 5 goals. And Taranto played extremely well, even though I thought these ex-teammates made a point of trying to give him one if they could. But it was a good game.
One point I meant to raise after the Geelong Western Bulldogs chat, how can you possibly have a situation where you've got 4 teams having a bye and yet they schedule 2 games at the same time? The Crows game and the Geelong game.
An utter thorough disgrace, and it just shows the contempt that they have for us as a club, or maybe all non-Victorian clubs, because the game that would have been televised in Melbourne would have been the
Geelong
Bulldogs
game. Yep.
Bulldogs game, and the AFL, the boldest AFL, wouldn't put us and Gold Coast on a Sunday late afternoon. Because they would know that the Victorians wouldn't watch it. So it's not about anybody but the Victorian population, the VFL. That's all it is. And you wouldn't get a better proof of that than putting those 2 games on at the same time.
Yeah, if ever you wanted an example of where the focus is, as you said, Macca, that scheduling was it. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
And, I think Gillon McLachlan, for people praised him for various things, I think he is the weakest, piss-weak bloke that's ever run this competition.
Gillon McLachlan knows which side his bread's buttered on, Macca. It's as simple as that.
Well, yeah, and he puts the butter on pretty thick. That's why he's been, I think it's about 12 months overdue for his retirement, isn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he stayed around to, just whitewash the, pardon the Hawthorn situation. So, yeah.
Oh, I probably had another couple of Mercedes to buy or something like that, so he just hung in there.
Mm.
I've got no time for it.
No, the last game of the round was also a good one. I didn't watch it, but it was down to the wire again, and Essendon by 6 points, which doesn't help us at all, 105 to 99. Again, North Melbourne kicking almost 100 points and losing. That doesn't. We've had some high losing scores, 99, 104. One of those rounds.
Look, it was a good game again to watch again, and unfortunately, North Melbourne really lost the game, I think, in the end, rather than Essendon winning it. They were in front with 5 minutes to go by a goal, and Zeeble was kicking out from a point, kicks it out on full without out of bounds. I couldn't get the bloody thing out. Anyhow, that comes back and they get a bloody goal, and then later on, Sheasel running into an open bloody goal from about 20 metres out. Why you would not do a drop punt is beyond me. Decides to just do a little side screw. Why would you do that? And misses. So, I mean, those 2 incidents were very focal incidents in the game, and would just change the whole nature of the whole game. And I think they could have won the game if they'd done. If Zeeble hadn't kicked it out of bounds on the full, and if Sheasel would have kicked the goal. I just think it would have had a different result. And I was barrack for North Melbourne too.
Yeah, never mind. All right, let's look a little bit more closely at the Crows game. And as we mentioned, 16-16, 32 scoring shots to 22 Macca. Probably gives you a little bit of a hint of the dominance in the second, or particularly in the second, the back end of the second quarter and the third quarter. 16-16, 112 to Adelaide 13-9, 87. 25 points in the end. And just before we do that, if we have a look at the ladder, we can see that we have Collingwood all clear on 44 points, Port Adelaide on 40, 32 for Melbourne and Brisbane, but the Lions have a game in hand. We have St Kilda also with a game in hand on 28. It shocks me that they're still up that high. Essendon on 28 points now with the Bulldogs. Geelong still in the 8 on 24 points on percentage to the Crows, and Freo with a game in hand. The Suns also sneaking up to 24 points and 100%. So they're sniffing around a bit. Then we've got the Swans on 20 with a game to come. Richmond on 18 with Carlton. The Giants they're a good team for 15th, 16th, and then at Hawthorn, North Melbourne, West Coast. So it was a bit of a costly one for us, Mac. It's drops us back out of the 8, and we had a real opportunity to maybe put a bit of a gap between us and the pack, if you like, and it just didn't happen for us.
Yeah, it was interesting because we looked like world beaters for a quarter and a bit, and then after that we looked like we'd never played football for a long time, and then we had one little burst where we suddenly looked like a team again. But I was very frustrated, because I don't think we selected the right side for the game in the first place, and I don't think that the coach moved his players around correctly. I think he tried some odd things that didn't really work. I suppose you do try things, but yeah, I just thought overall, and some players went from looking like they were going to be stars in the first quarter to becoming liabilities as the game wore on. I just thought it was a strange game.
I didn't feel like Nick's really addressed the areas that we were getting beaten in. There was no real effort, I guess, that I could see to change the way things were going around stoppage and around clearance. We got absolutely pantsed in the clearance stats, and Nick's even acknowledged it in the interview at half time, saying that whoever won contested ball was going to win the game, and it wasn't us. But there again, it's down to the players on the field, Macca, and I didn't feel like we adapted to the conditions. I feel like, I think it was it when Miller kicked that goal and it put us 35 points up?
Yeah.
It felt to me like we just slackened off 1 or 2%. And,
we did.
And Gold Coast kept hunting the ball, kept shuffling it forward. Their work in close was excellent, and they had enough outside runners to be able to move the ball forward. Once Doedee went off, we were disorganised down back, and we didn't really have an answer for Lukosius. Butts kept King covered, but it seemed to me that they cleared King out and made Lukosius the focus. And I think actually that Stuart Dew recognised that we were probably a tall short, and he made sure that mismatch, if you like, was the one that they went for.
Yeah, I don't think probably. I think you summed it up very well. I think that's exactly what he did do, because so many times it was just Lukosius on a one-out basis, and if he wasn't Lukosius, there was going to be one of the other tools on a one-out basis. So, they made sure that their tools weren't competing against each other.
Yeah, so, we covered it a bit in the opener, I guess, but our midfield really let us down. Our mainstays really let us down. Matt Rao, as I mentioned, is having a bit of a purple patch of form, but, we've got to be able to be good enough to... What we don't seem to be able to do, Mac, is we're very good when momentum's going our way, but we don't seem to be able to hold momentum. We've had a few goal runs against us this season, and 9 goals unanswered from Gold Coast to break the game right open and allow them to eventually turn the game around by 60 points. That's horrific in a half of football.
It is horrific. I mean, it's virtually, we're virtually not there. I mean, so many players were so feeble. Some guys who played were so below what they're capable of. Saligo, for example, I thought had a terrible, terrible game. He's capable of playing much better than that, but he was pretty terrible.
I don't know whether they're playing Saligo in a position that Jake necessarily understands, Macca.
I don't know. Yeah, look, when he's been played on a wing and with occasional stints in the centre, and I'm not talking about in those type of conditions, he's looked pretty good. And you know, you see him as we were seeing him as a real gun of the future, but his last couple of games have been just getting less, and I thought this was a real nothing game from him, the worst one that he's had. And you know, on his performance, he should probably be replaced.
Well, Alex in the YouTube chat makes a point that I agree with. I don't think he's a wingman. This is what I'm getting at, Macca. I actually think he's a genuine midfielder, and again, this is where I wonder whether he and Pedler in tandem, you know, we need to work these young guys, Rochelle and Rankin and Saligo and Pedler, in a broader rotation through there, just to get some young legs in there, get them used to the contest, but also provide a point of difference. And Jake Saligo is very good at getting clearances. We know what Pedler can do. Rankin's fantastic, particularly around stoppage, at getting clearance numbers. And Rochelle can be really dynamic as well. And I just feel like we're missing a trick. And I think we've been sucked in because we're, you know, in contention to make the finals, that we've actually lost what should be our primary focus this year, which is getting quality games and quality you know, time in the right position into our younger players.
I think you're spot on there, Fiend, because at the beginning of the season, that's exactly what he was trying to do, is to play the players in the right spots. And, you know, well, for them, for their, not just for that particular game, but for their future. And we were playing pretty well. And then as we've decided, it's looked more and more likely that we could possibly participate in finals, he's actually swung the side around a little bit more, like as if he's playing to try and get into the finals rather than worrying about the progress of the young players.
But it's actually counterproductive, because it was earlier in the season when we were seeing those lads running through the middle and having little, you know, 3 or 4 minute cameos through the middle. That's what actually was getting us to where we are now. And to revert back to a midfield that, let's face it, has not been successful. You know, it seems to me that it's counterintuitive, and I think, you know, we cannot be sucked into we need to make the 8. You know, we're still in development phase. We're still in growth phase. You know, a lot of people forget that a bloke like Rankin hasn't even played 50 games yet. You know, there's a lot of players that need time. And, you know, again, we're leaving a guy like Sam Berry out of the team in favour of a bloke like Ben Keys. And I have a problem when Ben Keys stinks it up the way he does with his disposal. You know, Rankin's played 48 games. He stinks it up with his disposal that Sam Berry can't get a run.
Well, I suppose Berry's also got to play well enough to deserve his spot, Fane. And I know
Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he doesn't. Look, SANFL form is misleading, Macca, and sometimes you've got to just play the kids.
Yeah, I know. I understand where you're going, but I also think that it can be counterproductive if you play them if they're not playing well.
Well, Barry's playing all right in the twos.
Yeah, I don't think he's looked. I don't look. Players can often just have a down season, and I just don't think he's looking like the Sam Berry of last year, for example. I mean, last year you would have thought he would have come out roaring like a bull this year, but it just hasn't happened.
So the thing of it is, we are now relying on blokes like Brodie Smith, Rory Sloane, Ben Keys, Rory Laird, Tex Walker. How are we developing this team?
Oh, we do have younger players playing as well, but you are right. The emphasis is the nucleus of the team is revolving around those players. You're quite right. But I think every team will have some senior players, and what we have missing, of course, is we don't have that middle section, the 25, 26-year-olds. So that's where we relied on, and that's why one of the reasons why we're relying on the not enough 100 to 200 games players. But that's why we're relying on those senior players, because we should be having, because the club did very poorly in its drafting for a period there, and we've got this gap. We've got this absolute
I understand
gap.
that, but you're not going to get buried to 50, 60, 100 games if you don't play them.
I understand that, but I still stand by the fact they still have to show enough to say that they deserve it. Otherwise, there's no point playing them.
Yeah, we've got players that are playing well enough in the SANFL to get a run in the ones, because we are still in development phase. Macca, we are still developing players, and Sloane, Walker, Brodie Smith, they are borderline not going to be involved in the next tilt.
They won't be.
And I think Matty Nix is getting sucked in, or the match committee are getting sucked in to being results driven, and they have lost sight of the development of the squad. And I think the unfortunate thing is that what got us into this position was some very good performances by our younger players, and now we're going back to relying on the old stages, and it's not only is it counterproductive from a development point of view, but we are starting to see that the old stages, which is what we knew all along, weren't actually up to it.
We still do have a lot of young players in the side, though, Fan.
Yeah.
You still have to have some form of balance. If you don't, I mean, if you want to look at the extreme of it, like West Coast before some of those senior players come back and they were just fielding out 22 young players, well then that's when they were getting the 20-year-olds plus the defeats. You've got to still have some stabilising factors with some senior players. Now, whether we've got all the right ones in the right places, I'm not prepared to commit myself and say that's 100% right. But you still do have to have some form of balance.
What I'm saying is that we are relying on those old stages. You can still have older stages in your team for experience and all that, but I'm talking about midfield in particular, Macca.
It is the midfield.
Where we have reverted back to type and played the old stages. Rory Sloane has been fantastic earlier in the season when he was playing cameos, playing off halfback and coming off the bench and all the rest of it. But now he's getting genuine midfield minutes, and I think it's counterproductive.
I agree with that. No, that is definitely Sloane is. Rory Sloane should really be not the leading player. He should be. The young kids should be able to go and Rory just helps them to go along, not rather Rory be the star of the show and the kids then hang off of him. So you're right.
Don't get me wrong, Sloane's had some really good cameo performances, which is exactly what we want from your senior guys. There's been times when Sloane has put us on his back and got us over the line, and that's exactly what you want. But you're actually diminishing his impact on the game when you're asking him to play a full game in the midfield when he's actually not physically capable of it. And so not only do we get those nice periods where he can take over a game, but we're cooking him for the whole game.
Look, he's one I definitely agree with. Yeah. But you're right. I think it's when you were talking about it before about the mix of players, it sounded like the whole team. But if you just focus it in on the midfield, definitely there's been an absolute reversion there back to the old heads. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. The other thing that I would suggest, Macca, is that our forward line, as star-studded as it is on paper, has become very, very, very lazy, in my view. Remember in the first couple of games how we're hitting up targets and we're making space and we're changing lanes and we're dropping our eyes. All that's gone out the window. And some of it is because we're under more pressure on transition. But I don't think the forwards are moving anywhere near as hard or working anywhere near as hard to make space as what they were earlier in the season.
If you're talking about Walker and Fogarty, I agree with you. Those two in particular, I thought, would never seem to be out in the open.
Correct.
And they never seem to be a long way apart from each other either, which was another thing. When we look at our best, we have a very widely spread forward line. And you've got a choice of going to Walker, or you've got a choice of going to Fogarty, or you've got a choice of going to Pedler, because everybody's spread. And it's always about the spread. We didn't, our forward line didn't function quite as well, but also I don't think the ball was coming in there anywhere near as good as it should be.
Andalew's saying in the chat 4 of our goals came from them on the lead. And that kind of proves my point, mate, because not only does movement create opportunities for them, but it also breaks up the defence and provides opportunities for others. For a Rankin, for a Pedler, those blokes. I also think we've actually suffered heavily by not having Sean McAdam back in the team. I think he's had wretched luck by getting that suspension and then being back in the twos, and he is really a point of difference in the forward line, and he provides a lot more pressure than people give him credit for. And I think with Tex and Fogg and Riley Thilthorpe often playing up the ground to get his marks, I think McAdam is the point of difference as a third tool that we miss at the moment.
I don't know how he's been going in the twos, but when he was in the A's before he disappeared, he was in startling form. He really add that X factor up in the forward lines.
Yeah. I honestly have been concerned for a couple of weeks with the forward line and also with our transition that we've started to see a reversion back to down the line footy. A reversion back to the tall forwards looking for the body instead of trying to get separation. All the things that made us look very, very potent at times earlier in the season seem to have gone by the wayside or seem to only occur in patches. And look, you've got to probably give opposition coaches a little bit of credit for that, because they would have seen how we match up and how we set up and how we move the ball, and they'd be coming up with ways to dampen that. But we have to be good enough to get through that. We have to be good enough to be able to work through whatever opposition strategies come our way. And I just feel like we're content when we don't get our easy flow. Then we just revert back to pack marking, and we don't have the players. Riley Thilthorpe isn't yet ready to be that big clunking forward taking marks. And as I said, I think we miss Sean McAdam in that space. Darcy took one or two nice grabs, but Tex has just gone back to that trying to get people under the ball and getting it over the back, which really frustrates the hell out of me.
Tex was behind far too much on the weekend, and he was, as you say, trying to push them under and get and make a space behind. But you really just needed the players to move around and make leads so that they try to cover more than one player. It's very hard to cover every player if they're all moving around.
Yeah, sorry, The Rock, Shay McAdam, not Sean McAdam. We've got Lockie Glant in the two. 1990 says he's not AFL standard. That's silly. He is AFL standard. You can't judge when he's only played half a dozen games and don't get a look in. He will be a good forward for someone. I don't know whether it'll be us. He's a Jack Gunston type, and he just needs to be played the right way and given a run of games. And who are
you going to take out? Who would you take out to put him in, Payne?
Gallant. Look, at the moment, I think I'd probably... based on what I saw on the weekend, it looks like Riley Thilthorpe's quite sore. So I wouldn't mind giving Riley a rest if he needs it, and I'd bring Lockie Gallant in for Riley Thilthorpe. Apart from that, I think it's a shuffle of the way we use Pedler and Saligo and Keys. We can get Gallant into a forward rotation with Fogarty, if we like, just by having that one forward on the bench. Ned McHenry can quite easily come out of that rotation. Lockie Murphy has had a couple of poor games since I pumped up his tyres. I don't know. I don't think we've got the mix right at the moment, Mac.
It hasn't been too good the last two games. So, but what is very hard is we've been playing. We won last week, but the Ballarat game and this particular game, they are sort of abnormal games in the sense one's freezing bloody cold and out in the country, and the other one's up bloody north in the bloody heat. With a side that's got a lot of young players in it isn't surprising though that they sometimes turn in a bad one thing.
No, it's
they
not.
They played very well against Brisbane.
No, it's not. But it's like Western Bulldogs, we turn in a bad one, and you go, okay, we turn in a bad one. It was a shit ground. We don't want to be there. Blah blah blah. Fair enough. But this game wasn't like that. We were 35 points up, Mac. It's not as if we were putting in a bad one. It's just that we didn't have the next gear when Gold Coast kicked it up a notch. And that to me is more of a concern. And we've seen that a couple of times this season. We've seen it against GWS. We've seen it against Richmond. There have been games where we have been, where we've had fast starts and teams have overrun us. And this was another one of those. We were doing it on the bit halfway through the second quarter. We're absolutely doing it on the bit. And you can't expect to have that level of momentum for the whole game. And what we do is we either kick ourselves out of the game when we do have momentum. But this game, it was more about we just went to pieces. So that's more of a concern than just having a bad game.
Well, it was amazing, though, how we went from being dominant to subservient. And we made the game look so easy in that first quarter and a bit, and then it was like somebody just turned off the switch and just said, "Well, that's not happening anymore. Now I want you to just play as if you're bloody West Coast." It was just the contrast was so huge for me.
And it was contested ball. It was all coalface, Macca. And that's, I guess, my point, that we got brushed aside. And I'm talking about our mature bodies. Got Rory Laird, Rory Sloane, Jordan Dawson, Benny Keys. Our mature, hard bodies got brushed aside by kids. Let's not forget that the Gold Coast Suns were a younger team than us this week.
Is that right?
Yes. Tell me their most experienced player. It was probably Levi Casbolt.
He would have been, yeah.
But around the ball, where was their Rory Sloane? Where was their Rory Laird?
Yeah, although the two blokes that carved us up, they've been a few years now. I mean, Morel and Anderson, they're very established players. So they're not young lads on the way up. They are established players. And good
They're not
ones.
Veterans by any stretch, Macca.
Not
They're
veterans.
2020, what was it, 2018 they came into the system? Was that their draft, or 2017?
17 at the earliest, yeah.
Yeah. Look, the simple fact is the Gold Coast were a very young team.
Yeah, but as somebody said in the chat, they've got a lot of top 10 picks in there as well, though, Fane.
All I'm hearing is excuses, mate. Our midfield has two multiple best and fairest for the club winners in it, plus Jordan Dawson, plus the bloke who has more hit-outs than anyone else in the AFL, and we couldn't get it done. Not even we couldn't get it done. We couldn't match them. When Matt Rao decided to go, he absolutely destroyed us.
He did, didn't he? Yeah. I think I do. Well, I just still think we're not a complete side at this stage by any means, and we will have it's going to be like that. We'll have our moments, and this one was extreme in terms of the difference. Extreme. And I think you've got to look at the players and say, I just can't accept that. But we are a younger side, and I think for that reason, we will always be a little bit inconsistent, but we've never been quite as bad as this.
Macca, that is just... Macca, I'm not going to argue with you this week because, that's boring to listen to, but I have to take you to task on this because it was not our young players that let us down. It was our senior players that let us down.
I thought there were a lot of players let us down. Not just, I think it was a mixture of both.
No, well, we've just finished talking about our midfield, which we said was full of senior players, and our midfield got pantsed.
Yeah, they did, but there wasn't much out of Soligo. There was nothing out of Ned. There was very little out of Rochelle. And if you go through the young blokes, there wasn't much there. I just don't think that
they weren't at the coalface, Macca.
No, that's true. We were very poor at the coalface.
Where did we get beaten at the coalface? Who was at the coalface? Our senior players. It's no good to say that we're a young team because it wasn't our young kids that got beaten. That wasn't the difference. Because you can point to a Soligo, you could also point to a Luke Pedler who kept us in the game at times. You can also point to, blokes down back, Max Michaelani, for example. Like, there are plenty of good kids are going to come in and out of the game, but if you're going to put your senior players around the coalface, you're doing it for a reason.
Right. Okay. And I agree with that. So who would you have had around there?
I've already said that. I would have run more rotations through Pedler. I would have run more rotations through Soligo, Rochelle, Rankin. We didn't see those blokes run through any CBAs whatsoever. At no stage did we make ourselves difficult to play against. At no stage did we change up our configuration when Gold Coast started to get on top around the contest. We never did. We just kept going to the well over and over and over again. The only thing that I saw Nicks do was pull O'Brien off and stick Murray in the ruck for 5 minutes, which was a bit mystifying considering we were already short-staffed down back. But it shows you how badly O'Brien was going. And obviously they couldn't ruck Thilthorpe, which is why I think Thilthorpe was sore. But it was around the coalface that we needed to change things up. And the blokes doing the most damage around the coalface were younger blokes.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, which is interesting about what you just said about Thilthorpe, I mean, you would hope that if Rob's going bad, that the Thilthorpe comes onto the ball and he takes over and he competes. But the fact that he didn't, or if he did, it was only for a very short period of time, makes you think that we were playing a relatively unfit player.
Or he hurt himself during the course of the game. I think he had a run in the ruck. I think I saw him take at least one or two centre bounces, I think, in the second quarter. I didn't see it after that.
No, because I just thought that was strange because we desperately needed it because Rob was just getting absolutely trounced. So, and he brought Murray up as the ruckman, and I just thought that was odd.
Well, who else was he going to ruck?
Yeah, but Murray's I think Murray's very close to being our best defender, and
So who else are you going to ruck if you want to give Riley a break and Thilthorpe's not able to?
Really, I don't really know. I just don't know the answer. But not many sides take their full back or their key backman and put them into the ruck and weaken their back line.
No, that's true. I'm just saying. I think he was probably out of options at that stage. He needed to get O'Brien off for a break, and as I said, I don't think Thilthorpe was able to for whatever reason.
Yeah, the Port Adelaide model's not bad in the sense that when they're not going any good in ruck, I mean they use Finlayson. Now Finlayson's not a ruckman backside, but they virtually concede the knock. But they virtually say we're going to have another midfielder on the ground. So, even something like that would have worked.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. There were other things, and I guess again that's where Nick's shows that he's a bit one-dimensional in his thinking.
Well, I think he is one-dimensional in his thinking, he's obviously very frustrated during the game because I can't remember when he ever came down and sat down next to the players and kept telling what he wanted them to do. So I don't know what it is that these specific players were supposed to do or hadn't done.
Oh, it was very obvious. It was the coalface statistics. He talked about it at halftime. The contested ball stat and the ground ball gets were two areas that he felt we were under pressure and we were going to have to go with Gold Coast because he realised that Gold Coast had lifted their work rate. And they were the two stats that we got slaughtered on in the second half. And I'm telling you right now, that's what he would have been digging into those players about.
Didn't work then, did it?
Well, no, of course not. But I mean, short of him going out and getting the ball himself, what else is he supposed to do?
Yeah, fair comment, Pete.
So let's have a look at some team statistics. I think we're at a very interesting stage here, and Macca, I was thinking about this a bit today, which is why I raised earlier about us maybe losing sight of what the grand plan is, because when you're contending for a finals position, obviously there's a tendency to want to go and get that finals position. Everyone wants to play finals. That's why you play footy. That's why you play sport. You want to get into the pointy end of the season. But it would be ridiculous to think that we would be contending for a premiership this year. And I think, therefore, there's a real challenge for the coaching staff over the next month or so to remember where we're at in our development and what we're trying to achieve. We've had a very tough first half of the year in terms of the draw and the travelling and all the rest of it. We get a freshen up after West Coast with a bye, which I think the club and some of the younger players probably need. But you would want to think that whether we make the 8 or not is more or less irrelevant. And what we need to be doing is continuing to develop the players that are going to come up next. And I don't know whether we're doing that well enough at the moment.
Look, that's an excellent point you raised there, Payne, and in the sense that we, as supporters, and we're all guilty of it, we want our team to be in the 8. But being in the 8 isn't everything, because we could get in the 8 and have no hope of winning the flag. So is it better to get in the 8 and sacrifice development of players, or continue to develop players and possibly by doing that miss out on the 8. And I think the second one is probably a better alternative. It's not for the coach, and maybe not all supporters would see it that way. But what we would then see in 2024 might be a much better team for doing that.
Yep. And, I don't think there's any problem with I don't think there's any reason to shy away from making the 8, because playing in a final is always good experience. But you don't want to get there for the sake of getting there, right? And as I said earlier, some of the early wins that we had this season were on the back of some really good performances from our young players. And we seem to have reverted back to using the old stages to our detriment. Not only are we not looking as convincing, but, what's the point? In the meantime, we've got blokes in the 2s that we need to get games into. We need to be developing. We need to be understanding whether these blokes have got it or whether we need to move them on. So, I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting time. I will say that Matthew Nicks, if he was to take us to a premiership, Macca, no coach in the AFL era has gone from a 30% winning record to a premiership. And if he does it, that's what he will have achieved.
Yeah. Yeah. All I can say, I know history is against it. That's for certain.
Yeah.
Because it's such a big thing to ask, and you only need one. You might be improving the team gradually every year, and you might be getting close to getting to the 8, and then you have one bad year, and then you're dead in the water. This is the coach I'm talking about. So it's very hard for any coach that comes into a team and takes them from the bottom up, because if there's any hiccups along the way, well, then they're the victim. There's no doubt about it. It will be the player's fault, but he's going to be the victim.
Yeah.
So,
and
I think that's one of Nick's problems. I think he feels he's got to get it either into the 8 or just outside the 8.
Yeah, and which is where I felt at the beginning of the season we were good enough to make the 8. I still feel like we're good enough to make the 8. But I'm not going to be disappointed if it ends up being 9th or 10th either, because that's about where we are. We're around the fringes right now. We've beaten sides in the 8. We've beaten Brisbane. We've beaten St Kilda. So it's not as if we're not around the mark. And it's a very, the gap between, probably 14, 15 teams in the competition from best to worst is not that great. You can have an off day like we had against Western Bulldogs and get destroyed. So it's, and my point about the statistic was not so much an indictment on Nicks. It was more about what he has to achieve in order to achieve success. He took hold of a squad on the downward spiral, and it will be a massive achievement for him if he is able to go from a 30% win-loss record to a premiership. It will be massive. So and no one's ever done it before. And there's been plenty of coaches that have taken over bad lists. So we can't underplay what a mountain it has been to get us even to where we are at the moment. But what I'm just concerned about is that we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in terms of results, when what we need to remember is we're still developing, and we've still got players on our list that, even last year we thought were best 22, like Sam Berry, and we need to, for odds Billy, I'm talking career, not just this year. Sam Berry, Harry Schoenberg, Jackson Haitley, Lockie Gallant, Brennan Cook, like all of those sort of lads. Nankervis, we have to test them out.
Yeah, I agree. I do think, there's certainly games we should target where we're going to put in one or two of these lads that at least to give them a try.
Yep. So anyway, let's have a look at some team stats, shall we? Because that will probably tell us something. We won the disposal count 309 to 330. They kicked it more than us. They're a 2-1 handball, 2-1 kick to handball team. We knew that coming in, and that's exactly how they play, Mac. They don't handball much. They get the ball forward by foot. We were 208 to 122. Inside 50, 61 to 58. They went at 60% disposal efficiency. We went at 70, and that tells you a bit about how the game was played, Mac. That maybe we just tried to be a little bit too cute. They were more intent on just moving the ball forward, and we were just a bit too cute, perhaps.
Well, as Dermot Burton kept saying all the time, that Gold Coast, even when there's an opportunity, they won't go out wide. They were just going always down the centre, which is the shortest way home. And so they kick it, even if they kick it to a pack, and okay, it might be repelled 5 times out of 6, but there's the 6th one get through and they get a goal. That's pretty good. So they were obviously under instructions to do that. We were trying to play our normal fancy game, and as you pointed out, we had a lot more handballs than they did. And handballs don't gain you a lot of distance, and they've got to be spot on, and they can't be to a player under pressure. So whereas with a kick, if you kick it in, say, 40, 50 metres, in these slippery conditions, where it's impossible to play perfect football, then at least you've got a 50-50 chance to either, well, not so much mark it, but at least get to the ground and compete. And I think they played the game they played, while it wasn't so wet, our game worked. As soon as it got slippery in the second half of the second quarter, and we're still trying to do the same thing, that's when it all went wrong. And they're playing very direct football, and we're still trying to play fancy football, and it just went downhill from there. So, I think the coach is at fault here to some degree. He should have changed our game plan in the sense of just be very direct with it, do what they're doing, because it's working for them. Ours had stopped working for us. Yeah. And as the game went on, the ball got slipperier and slipperier. It was harder and harder to do. So, we should have actually just changed what we were doing.
Interestingly here, you talk about efficiency inside 50. They AFL.com.au says that Gold Coast had 29 shots from 61 inside 50s, and we had 28 shots from 58 inside 50s. We only had 22 scoring shots. So does that mean that 6 shots are counted that didn't make the difference or didn't score?
Well, obviously it has to be that, doesn't it? Interesting.
I've never noticed that before. Because our efficiency, as far as I'm concerned, efficiency inside 50 should be scoring shots, not shots. It should be scoring shots.
No, I could still be hitting a target right in front of goal.
But that's not, no, but the efficiency inside 50 is how many shots per inside 50.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
So it should, but to my way of thinking, it should be scoring shots, not shots. Because we only had 22, we kicked 13 goals, 9, so we had 22 scoring shots. If they used that stat, we would have been our efficiency would have been far less than what the 48% is that we've got here. It's 61 to 58 inside 50s, and yet we had, what did I say earlier, 12 or 13 less scoring shots. So how can our efficiency be the same? Doesn't make sense. Free kicks 29 to 23. I haven't touched on the umpires yet because at the end of the day, we should not have let Gold Coast get back in front. But it was pretty interesting umpiring in the last quarter, Mako.
Well, yeah, one particular free must be mentioned, and that was the 50-metre free against, was it Jones?
Against Jones. It was just unbelievable.
Well, I watched that and replayed that several times and saw where the players actually took the mark or mark. Jones was exactly on the spot where the mark was taken. Exactly on the spot. So I don't know why. How could he call 50 metres?
Yeah, it
Jones
was horrible. It was just horrible.
and that umpire 22, he didn't actually make that decision, but I must admit he had his little influence during the game, and I must admit I'm sure that we hate him hate getting him as an umpire each week, and AFL. The more you complain about an umpire, they will keep giving him that umpire every time you complain.
Yeah, but it was not him. I think it was 9 or 6 or I don't know, one of the others.
No, he didn't get the Jones one, but he did have his little moments during the game.
Yeah, but the last quarter there was some mystifying frees. The one that Sloane gave away for too high, the Jordan Butts holding the ball. There was a few of them. But as I said, at the end of the day, we had the opportunity to take the umpires right out of the equation. Scoot, I can see who's in the chat with their hands up, and we will get C's girl on shortly. Don't worry. So it certainly stopped any sort of momentum we might have had in the last quarter, but it should never have come to that, should it?
No, the other thing too, that 9-goal unanswered run. Yes, you've got to blame the players for that, but you also have to blame the coaching panel for not thinking of an answer to somehow slow that down.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely, Macca. There was. I mean, I guess defensively we're a little bit stymied with Doedee going down. And our sub was Ned McHenry, so that didn't provide us with a lot of options defensively, which meant we had to sacrifice Mitch Hinge, who I thought looked a little bit at sea against Lukosius. So that didn't help us. But again, I feel like the damage was done. Further up the ground. We gave them far too much supply, in my opinion, during that period.
We just allowed it, and anything, clog up the game, whatever. There had to be some moves made that could clog that game up to stop that run, because it was just too easy. They were just getting them at will, and we were trying to do what we were. It's the same old story. If you do what you've been doing and it hasn't been working, well, you're just going to get the same result every time. And we didn't change. We just didn't change things.
No, that's exactly right. We kept trying to play the game style that we wanted to play rather than the game style we needed to play, Mac. And to me, that's lazy. 46 to 41 clearances, 18 to 13 at centre, even around stoppage. But this is the one here, Mac, that Matthew Nix would have been pissed off about. 174 to 136 contested possessions. That's a pantsing.
That's on the players. That's on nobody else. That can't be on the coach.
Exactly.
That's on the players.
Exactly. So if you look at contested possessions, out of the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, out of the top 10, we had 3, they had 7. Noah Anderson with 18, Laird with 14, Rao with 13, Humphrey with 13, Davies with 12, Holman with 11, Lukosius with 10, Ben Keys with 10, David Swallow with 9, Lockie Murphy, Chase Jones and Darcy Fogarty with 9. But just not enough from our coal-faced players. And see, this is what I'm getting at, Mac, when you're talking about a bloke like, say, Jordan Dawson had 8 contested possessions for the game on a wet day. He only had 1 more contested possession than Rory Atkins. Rory Sloane only had 6 contested possessions for the whole game. Only 6. Brodie Smith only 5 contested possessions for the whole game. And I'm telling you right now, Brodie Smith a couple of times could have gone into a pack for a mark and he didn't. I don't know whether people noticed that, but there were a couple of times that Brodie Smith could have come in from the side and killed a contest, and he chose not to. And I thought that was pretty average.
I didn't actually pick that up, Bane.
Yeah, a couple of times he did it. Isaac Rankin only had the 5 contested possessions. Wayne Miller only had 5. A lot of players that you would want to be up in and around the contest that weren't. If we have a look at ground ball gets, for example, Laird and Anderson had 13, Humphrey 11, Holman 11, Van Keys 9, Fiorini and Davies 9. Again, just not a lot of output from our like Rory Sloane, 3 ground ball gets. Josh Rochelle, 3 ground ball gets.
That's not good enough. No.
you know,
Not when the game, not in those conditions. That's where they should be.
exactly.
In that condition, they should be dominant in that area.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Oh, there we are. Yeah, so, a couple of key stats there that really highlighted, I think, why Matthew Nix was so peeved. And it was all the coalface stats. We had 163 uncontested possessions to 126 and lost comfortably. So usually when we get the ball on the outside, we win. But it just goes to show you that wasn't the type of game that was being played.
No, because we might have got the first one on the outside, but it didn't continue after that, unfortunately.
Exactly.
So it was a game really of just slugging to once about halfway through that second quarter. It was a game where they just slugged it out, and we were trying to be fancy, and we just got knocked off our perch.
Yeah. Marks 60 to 56, inside 50, 6 to 10 our way. Contested marks 11 to 8 their way. But they took 74 to 62 intercepts, Mac, and that was exactly what was happening, particularly in that run, that they were able to cut us off. We got a lot of outside ball, but they were cutting us off and turning it over. So, it wasn't really effective, the amount of ball that we got on the outside. Tackles 54 to 77, inside 50, 12 to 20 our way. So, nothing wrong with tackling pressure, but again, it wasn't. They were able to shake free and get the ball moving, so it wasn't a key factor.
Well, let me put this question to you, Fang. He's been our captain before. He's been a very good servant of the club. But I think that playing Sloane is a negative factor because he's not going to be around when we ever do make finals, and or we're really in the hunt for a premiership. And I don't think his output is it's not all. It's at times it's good, at times you can see he's just not quick enough, and he's also holding back a young player playing in that midfield. So, am I being harsh on him, or should he be not picked?
No, look, I think at times this year we've sung Rory's praises, Macca, as recently as last week against Brisbane. I think it's how we're playing him. It's not. He should not be a mainstay in the midfield rotations. It just should not be a mainstay. It's not what he's in the team for. Remember this year we started him off half back with cameos in the middle. We could start him as a sub. We could start him on the bench and just rotating through a few positions. I'm quite happy for Rory Sloane to be in the team under certain circumstances for a particular role. But if you're going to play him as part of your number one midfield rotation, you're making a mistake, in my opinion.
That's where I'm coming from, because he's actually, there is no development going on because we're playing. Dawson is Dawson, and he's good, and Laird is good. Keys is used in there for some purposes, sometimes not. But when you play Sloane in there, you've got like 4 senior players and no juniors in there developing. And to me, I think that, and you pointed out quite rightly, what we need is midfielders. We need quality midfielders, and you said that we should be out chasing midfielders from other clubs or from wherever. And I agree with you. But at the moment, we're not giving the ones that we've got, the juniors we've got, the chance to develop.
True. Just before we get into individual stats, Seasgirl, how are you going?
Hey guys, how are we? Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear, and I'm delighted to hear you.
Fantastic. Look, something I've just noticed a couple of weeks. So Rory Laird, supposed to be in all Australian form. So 2 weeks ago, played 82% of the game. The last 2 weeks has only played 74. Being managed, I assume.
I think there's an answer for that. He got a very nasty knee in his rib cage going back 2 weeks ago, and he was very dubious about getting up to play last week, and he did play, and again he played again this week, but he's not quite at his very best because, as I said, it was a really nasty knee into his rib cage that he got. So it's obviously affecting him.
So why wouldn't you play Sam Berry?
For a couple of weeks and then put Sam Berry in, or a Pat Parnell, or a young kid to get some games into him.
Well, I probably do that, but I'm not the coach. This is Nick's. He just sticks with the same guys.
But I mean, we're not talking about what Nix does. We're talking about what Nix should do, and it's an extremely good point that you make, Seeds Girl, because I'm 100%. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Why are we playing half-injured players at the expense of blokes that can come in and do a job? And yeah, they might not be tearing up the SANFL, but Sam Berry is almost a like-for-like replacement for Rory Laird in terms of what he brings, and it might be just the opportunity he needs.
You've got that kid that you need in the middle getting some games, and you've got your two key players beside Keys and whoever else would be there. I mean, Sloan, I agree with you. Fenn should be a rotation off the bench. Should not be starting in the midfield at all, or should be off the half back line. I said that at the beginning of this year, and I do value his leadership skills when Dawson's having a bad game. But, he should definitely be a rotation rather than a starter in the midfield. And all those people in the chat having a go at Rankin for one bad game, go check yourselves, please.
Yeah, you're quite right about that.
The only thing that I'll say about Rankin, it has now happened 3 times where he has had opportunities to kick goals where he's been on the run and coming into forward 50 and he's shanked every one of them. And I don't know, that's like that. Why did he try and kick that ball around his body when he was running straight at goals? I don't understand.
That's what all players are doing now, Finn.
Well, then if they're going to do it, if they're going to do it, Seas Girl, they want to bloody do it. You don't like. He turned an easy shot into a harder shot, and then he didn't even make the distance because he bellied it. And at other times during the year, he's not made the distance or he's fluffed it up. It's very interesting that when he gets the ball in hand, when he's on his own and he's running into goal, he seems to have to, when he has to think too much about it, he ends up having 7 different options in his head.
Yeah, look, he's a player that plays on instinct, and you're quite right. When he's got too much time to think, that's when he usually buggers up. And in that particular instance, Fiend is right. That was just a straight run at goal and kick it. But for some reason he did, and you're right, also right, Tees Girl, in the sense that so many players do it in this day and age, but there's also a lot of players that do it and stuff up. There's always a risk factor if you don't get it exactly in the right spot, or if you hit it in the belly of the ball, it just goes flying sideways. So when you're running at goal, I mean, surely at that level, and he wasn't on it wasn't too severe an angle. Surely he could have threaded right through the guts.
You just got to push it.
I totally agree.
Yeah, you just run straight, and your impetus takes the ball straight through the goal. So, and he doesn't do anything magic like waving the ball around when he kicks the ball. He does hold it properly, and he puts it in front of his boot. He's just got to run straight. But look, I think he mentally was a little bit under pressure because they were actually behind play. They were giving him a lot of physical buffeting. And I think that was distracting his mentality a little bit. But look, don't worry about him in the sense that yes, he did let us down a bit in this particular game, but he'll be good.
Yeah. And one more thing. There is a SANFL coach that is undefeated this year that definitely deserves another chance at a coaching position.
Wouldn't be the Sturt head coach, would it, Seasco?
I think you know me too well, mate.
They're
Who is
travelling
it?
very nicely.
Who is the
Marty Sheep.
Yeah, I think Marty's going to be an assistant coach, not the coach at AFL
But he's
level.
done the assistant coach at AFL at Sydney. He did do a bit of coaching for a bit in the AFL and deserves a second chance. He's had his... If we're talking about Buckley getting a second chance, why isn't Matner getting talked for a second chance?
When you're talking about Buckley, you're talking about somebody who's coached at AFL level for, well, a lot of years. And
Marty Matner was assistant coach at Sydney for 4 years, and then was a senior coach for 2 years after that. So that's 6.
Oh yeah, I'm not rubbishing Matt Matner, but his record is as an assistant coach. Buckley is as an AFL coach, and he's had some pretty good years as a coach as well. I'm not saying
Matner's a premiership coach.
I was going to say that 3-time premiership coach coming up. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's at a different level, though. Thing it's still got to be. There is a big difference.
It's still a premiership coach.
All right, Macca. I'll give you this. Right, they're pulling all these bloody blokes from assistants like Voss and Buckley was an assistant for a while, and Brett Ratton was assistant, all the rest of it, and none of them are doing any good. And we've got these days when coaching jobs come up, it's almost like, well, shit, who do you get? To the extent where Essendon had to go for Brad Scott because there was literally no one in the pool. And I think that there are some state league coaches, like Statistical points out, that are severely underrated. And I would agree with you, Mac, if they'd only ever played at SANFL level, then coached at SANFL level. Marty Matner played over 200 games and won a flag with Sydney under Paul Roos, and has been a successful assistant coach at 2 clubs and won 2 premierships at SANFL level from 3 attempts.
Yes,
I don't know.
Correct. And coming up for 3 out of 4.
So if you had the choice of Buckley, Hardwick, or Matner, who are you going to pick?
Well, Hardwick, obviously.
Hardwick doesn't want... Well, Hardwick, yes, but Hardwick doesn't want to coach anyone else at the moment. He wants to take, 2 years off. Wouldn't surprise me if he goes to Tassie, but,
All I'm saying, Macca, is that don't discount good state league coaches. You don't have to be... Just because you've played at AFL level and then gone into an assistant situation, that shouldn't be the only pathway.
I mean,
Marty Matner's gone back and coached his own team. Like, assistant coaches aren't responsible for their own team. Sorry, C's, I'm cutting you off there. Go for it.
The Centrals coach that won 9 in a row. Yeah.
Laird.
Prime example of someone that's won premierships in what you call a different sort of game plan, but really should have had his chance in the big dance.
He, by his own words, said he didn't want to be.
Yeah, he didn't
want
it. No, he didn't want it. So
he didn't want it.
He got
approached.
He
didn't want it.
But in principle, I'm with you, Seedsgirl. I think that there's a difference between being an assistant coach and having coached your own team. And I think even though Matner's coached his own team at a lower level, I think that certainly requires skills that an assistant coach at AFL level doesn't need. An assistant coach at AFL level just needs to be a people manager, Mac. Simple as that.
Yeah, but I still don't. But while you might be right that he potentially could be a very good coach, I don't think anybody's ever going to take an SAFL coach and make them an AFL coach directly. They might have them in there. They might have them in their club as an assistant coach for some time, and they build up a very good record, like McRae did. But yeah, McRae, that's a good example. But he didn't. But he's not coaching Richmond. He was a coach in Richmond Reserves, and then he got taken by another club. But so all I'm saying is I'm not rubbishing Marty Mattner. He's done outstandingly well. I'm just saying I can't see that he will become an AFL coach, not because he's no good, just because of the way they do things.
Well, that's where our SA club should be recruiting from then.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you, C's girl.
Bye.
Farewell.
You did well.
Have a good evening.
You did well.
All right, some individual stats, Macca, I think, and we won't spend a huge amount of time on this because we've kind of talked it pretty much to death, but it shows you how misleading stats can be. If we look at some of our main stats winners, Geordie Dawson, 30 touches, 20 and 10, 7 marks, 6 tackles, whilst he did have good numbers, 7 marks, kicked 1 goal, 1, 8 contested possessions, 20 uncontested. To me, in terms of when the whips were cracking, he, along with the rest of our midfield, were found a little bit wanting this week.
I think they were, all of them.
So 20, the thing that worries me, God, this thing always goes nuts when I try to scroll it. The thing that worries me is 20 centre bounce attendances for 0 centre clearances, Macca.
I didn't realise he didn't have any clearances at all.
He had 2 stoppage clearances, no centre clearances.
Yeah, well, look, he was definitely tagged. He was very heavily tagged, but I didn't realise. Yeah, that's not too good.
I don't think he was heavily tagged. I think he was beaten to the ball.
Well, okay. At times he was tagged, and I thought he still had got the ball. Was it about 30 times? Is that right?
30 touches, 20 and 10.
Yeah, I mean, so while we criticise him in certain areas, he still made a contribution. I mean, if every player had got 30 touches, well, we would have won the game. And somebody said he's trying to do too much. Well, I think that's true. I think he does try to do too much. I think he feels like it's on his shoulders to try and get this team over the line, and sometimes that can actually backfire on you.
I think that's a reasonable point, Macca. I think that there is a bit of that about him, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed, because I'm not sure whether he feels like he's got great support around him, and therefore I feel like he has a sense of responsibility. But if he's going to play midfield, then he has to contribute by moving the ball forward, and 0 centre clearances and only 2 around stoppage isn't really what he's there for. He had 10 uncontested possessions and 10 contested possessions. Only 8 score involvements, or when I say only, that's not terrible. 8 score involvements. Sorry, I'm looking at Ben Keys now. Sorry about that. I'll go back to Geordie. I thought that looked a bit wrong. 20 uncontested possessions, 5 turnovers, 4 intercepts. That makes sense now. Only 6 score involvements. So out of those 30 touches, he was only involved in 6 scores, Mac.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at that, though, because...
but you just said he still had an influence.
Well, he did. I mean, the fact that we got the ball 30 times is some influence. I mean, as opposed to an opponent getting it. I mean, there were other players. If you look at Saligo, I don't know what his stats were, but they were very small.
We're looking at Jordan Dawson, who's the captain of the club and our number 1 midfielder. I know, Jake.
But
you can't. How can you compare Jordan Dawson to Jake Saligo? Come on, mate. Come on.
You're missing
the simple fact. The simple fact is he got 2 clearances.
Can I finish the sentence I was trying to say about 5 minutes ago?
Yeah.
The fact that he at least got the ball 30 times, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, at least he did get it 30 times. And And no, there are players that just didn't get the ball very much at all. That's the point I was trying to make. And yes, he's trying to do too much, and in my opinion, by trying to do too much, he's actually achieving far less than he would be if he just didn't try to put it all onto his own shoulders.
So you're applying the Matt Crouch defence?
No, I'm not trying to trip.
Yeah, well, this is exactly what you say about Matt Crouch, that, you know, he gets the ball a lot, so he has an influence. Well, no, he doesn't. Like, the fact that he got the ball so often and yet was so not involved in our scoring attempts says what you need to know. He's not effective. Like, anyone can get the ball and kick it, but Brodie Smith gets the ball and kicks it, and then it comes right back over his head. Like, stats aren't, like, just because he gets 30 touches doesn't mean anything. Look at a guy like Luke Pedler, who gets 12 kicks or 12 touches a game, and yet every time he's around the ball, something happens.
I've already conceded he wasn't one of his good games, but I don't think he was hopeless, mate.
Well, I didn't say he was I didn't say he was hopeless.
Look, I'm not going to say anything because I'm going to be wrong whatever I say, however I put it. I'm going to be wrong. I am. I'm always wrong.
26 disposals for Brodie Smith, 21 kicks, 5 handballs, 4 marks. He had 5 contested possessions, 13 uncontested possessions, 4 turnovers, 4 intercepts, 4 uncontested marks, 815 metres gained, although how many kick-outs did he have? He had 8 kick-ins, so that probably contributed a little bit to his metres gained. No clearance stats whatsoever, no tackles at all, Brodie Smith whatsoever, which kind of underpins what I was saying before about I saw him just not go at 100% at a couple of contests. So, yeah, I wasn't particularly... Here's another one who had 26, what I would say, insignificant touches.
Again, some of them were okay, but Smith has got a certain manner of playing which we've criticised consistently, which is bombing the ball. I think that's always going to be that's the way he plays, and it's not necessarily always good for the side either. But until we get rid of him, I think that's how it's going to be for him.
Right, Ben Keys, 25 disposals, 18 kicks, 7 handballs, 3 marks, 10 tackles, 2 goals, 2. 10 contested, 10 uncontested possessions, 6 turnovers, 8 score involvements. He had 2 marks inside 50, 389 metres gained, 24 centre bounce attendances for 2 centre and 4 stoppage clearances. Just not enough from someone like 2 centre clearances from 24 attempts is just not enough. Particularly where, I mean, I understand that he was guarding Rao for a lot of it, but if we had a look at Matty Rao's clearance numbers, you would see that Benny Keys didn't really negate him at all. You know, as always, his effort stats are really good, 10 tackles, etc., etc. You know, and you know, he's such an enigma, Mako. He tries so hard, as you mentioned, continuously. His effort is off the charts, but you know, at what point does the negative outweigh the positive, I guess?
Well, as 90 Crow said, that Keys overall had a positive impact on the game. He just shouldn't be in the middle because he's not that type of midfielder that dominates. What I like about Keys is his effort, and I know that he's not polished, he's not skilled, but the one thing you can count on Keys, he'll be running as hard in the fourth quarter as he was running in the first, second, and third. Whereas some of the other blokes by then have just given up and just allowing opponents to run wildly everywhere. So, and he's not a slow player. He's got pace. He's a horrible kick. He's a good tackler. I thought if you look at the overall contribution to the game, because if you went through and looked through our whole list of 22, 23 players and just saw and rated their contributions to the game, no matter how bad we played overall. I thought he would have been high up in those that rated in terms of giving something to the team.
Rory Laird had 22 disposals, 11 kicks, 11 handballs, 3 marks, 5 tackles. He had 14 contested possessions, 8 uncontested, turned it over 3 times, only 4 score involvements. 15 pressure acts, 26 centre pounce attendances for 2 centre clearances. So, again, these stats just highlight how much we got torched in centre, and only 2 stoppage clearances, which is where sometimes Rory can get to work. So
you'll find Laird is very heavily strapped underneath that Guernsey.
I know that. I'm just reading out his stats. So he didn't have an influence where his number one KPI is, which is at clearance. If he wasn't physically capable of having that influence, he shouldn't have been picked.
That's possibly true, because one of his greatest KPI is his number of tackles made, and his number of tackles were way down on his normal output, and that's because of his body at the moment. But he's being played, I think, when he's only about half fit, because he's very sore around the body.
No, that's stupid. Wayne Miller did some really nice evasive work, which it's nice to see him getting back to doing that sort of stuff, but he only had 9 kicks and 11 handballs, and it's interesting when we get Brodie Smith back in the side, Wayne Miller's output diminishes, and this is, I think, Macca, where I'm talking about whether Brodie Smith needs to be in this team, because we get a lot more value from Wayne Miller's disposal, and he gets a lot more of it when Brodie Smith isn't in the side. That's my comment, I guess.
Well, I thought Miller's game was very good in terms of in relativity to the rest of the team, because some of his dancing in between and out of players is just phenomenal, really, and his usage of the ball was exceptionally good. So I don't know what his efficiency rating was, but I would have thought it would be pretty high. In terms of his, Smith's virtually run his race, and it's just a question of how long will he be there.
Yeah, but I think the point that I'm making is that it was interesting last week when we didn't have Smith against Brisbane. Miller was a key element across halfback, and this week with Smith back on deck, Miller's output was diluted. So we're kind of getting poor quality output from Brodie Smith, even though he gets a lot of it. And we're getting less of Wayne Miller, who usually, he used the ball at 95% this week, which is ridiculous in those conditions.
Yeah, if I remember right, didn't Jones play in that role last week?
Sorry?
When Smith was out, didn't Jones play in his role?
I'm talking about Miller's output last week, Macca.
Yeah, I'm talking about in that particular game, the other flanker, Smith wasn't in that game. And I'm saying, was it Jones there? And Jones plays a pretty direct type of game rather than Smith, who just bombs it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, did he work better with Jones than he did with Smith? That's the point I'm trying to make.
I don't think it makes any difference. I think what happens is that Miller gets involved more when Smith isn't there. Speaking of Jones, Jones had 17 disposals, 11 kicks, 6 handballs, took a mark, 3 tackles. Also went at good disposal efficiency, 88%. He had 9 contested and 5 uncontested possessions, 4 turnovers. What else did he do? 502 metres gained. He's nice and direct, as you say, Macca, with his work. He got 3 stoppage clearances as well. So maybe it's time that Chase actually had a couple of CBAs as well, just to mix things up. Only 3 tackles. I thought he could have got involved more physically. 9 rebound 50. So I thought, it wasn't a bad game from Chase. Probably didn't benefit from the reconfiguration down back.
I thought he had a good game though. I thought he he's really believes in himself now. There's no doubt about it. He believes in himself, and he goes in hard for the ball. He tackles hard, and he does try, and he does try and clear at pace, and he's got very good foot skills. I think he's going to develop into not the player that we thought he was going to be, but he's going to develop into a much better player than we originally, once we'd seen him, thought he was going to be.
Yeah, Rory Sloane, 17 disposals, 13 kicks, 4 handballs, 2 marks, 4 tackles. Won at 71% disposal efficiency, 6 contested, 9 uncontested possession. Turned it over 7 times, Rory. Only had 4 scorer involvements. And the biggest thing here, 13 centre bounce attendances for only 2 clearances. So again, quite ineffective. Although he wasn't too bad around stoppage clearances. Only the 4 tackles. I just thought we ran him through the middle too much, Rory.
I agree totally.
Mitch Hinge looked lost. Lockie Murphy got back into the old habit of flying for marks, which I didn't like at all. We've talked about Darcy and Tex maybe being a little bit lazy. Lockie Scholl, a lot of people having a real big crack about Lockie Scholl. I didn't actually think his game was too bad considering the conditions didn't suit him. But I don't know what your thoughts on Lockie Scholl were, Mac.
Didn't do nothing majorly wrong, but he didn't do nothing majorly right. He sort of, I thought he got a few possessions, but I thought it was a bit of a nothing game, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did get a lot of possessions, and I can't understand the amount of negativity about his work because, we had a lot of uncontested ball on the outside, and I didn't really. I mean, if we have a look at his stats, he had 15 kicks, 8 handballs. Went at 67%, 3 score involvements. I mean, he only 172 metres gained. I think that's probably the area where that's really indicative of where our game plan fell down, Macca, because for an outside player like Scholl, he should have had 500 metres gained, and I think we were trying to play that cute sort of hit up, sort of stuff, whereas really when we got it to 60, we should have been trying to get it deep and locking it in. But we were probably overusing it, and maybe that's indicative of Scholl's stat there, the metres gained stat.
Yeah, that's what I was really getting at, that he didn't have an real impact on the game in the sense that he, as you said, he did get a reasonable amount of the ball, but you can't think of anything that emanated from those possessions that he got. Yeah.
Of the rest, Rankin was sort of sketchy, didn't have as much influence as usual, I didn't think. Thilthorpe, took a couple of nice marks, but really didn't have any impact. Luke Pedler, again, a 10 disposal match that just makes you think, wow, if he could double that, he would absolutely slaughter a game. Every disposal that he gets, every time he gets near the ball, it seems to be effective in some way or another, make something happen.
I was going to say, for a guy that doesn't get a lot of possessions, all the commentators, even every game that he plays, they can pick it out that this is going to be one very good play down the track.
Mm-hmm. Max Michael did quite well. Riley O'Brien, we've talked about. It'll be interesting to see where they give Kieran Strawn a run against West Coast, just to give O'Brien a bit of a touch-up. And the rest of it, Tex had 2 goals but was pretty ineffective apart from that. Murray and Butts, I thought, battled hard and Saligo went missing.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got West Coast next week, and, for all intents and purposes, that should be one that we can put in the win column, but they showed against Collingwood that they've got a little bit of something going on, and Tim Kelly is no slouch, and when he's got 1 or 2 mates, like a Gaff or a Yeo last week for periods of the game, they can hurt you a bit. And the lad up forward for them is just a champion in the making. So we're going to have to play at our full potential to win the game.
Yeah, on paper, you'd say, yeah, they're no good. They've only won one game or whatever it is. I think it's only one game, isn't it? And yeah, this should be a lay down there. But we lost after when we played GWS in similar sort of heat. We lost to Richmond in the dying stages, and the following game after that. And now West Coast aren't winning Richmond, but they did put up 2 very good quarters against Port, so they're not completely hopeless. And so we would have to, hopefully we have the lightest of weeks, and our boys can get freshened up. And if we can get our game going, and it really should be, if we can get our game going at its best, it could be a percentage game. But if we played like we did in the last 2.5 quarters on Saturday, we'll go down. We could possibly get beaten. So, because that was so bad. So I think we'll win, and I think we should. But I don't think we'll give them a trouncing. I think if we win, we'll win by about 5-6 goals.
Okay, I think we'll end up winning by 10 plus. I'm looking for a bounce back. The only query for mine is how we go fitness wise. So, I'm with you. Hopefully Burgess manages that appropriately, and they've learnt from the recovery from GWS or lack thereof. We'll be at home. West Coast have been struggling. They did show a bit against Collingwood, like we said, but it would be a bit diabolical if we were to drop this one. And I think if you'd have said to everyone on this podcast and everyone listening and, most Crows fans, if we could have got to the bye, if we at the beginning of the year said we were going to get to the bye at 7-6, you'd take that?
You would take it. Yeah, every day of the week. So, and then you've got a week's rest, and hopefully they sort out the team and possibly a couple of changes and get it probably what it should be. Who knows what can happen in the second half? But I'm like you, Glenn. I'm not interested in necessarily getting into the 8. I'm interested in seeing this team improve all the time.
Well, time will tell. And speaking of time, our time's up at 2 hours and 10 minutes, Macca. So thanks to everyone who's joined us tonight on YouTube and also on Discord. Don't forget, if you want to be part of our Discord channel, the links are in all our socials. There's good chat about the Crows every day and night during the week, and we also have our game day chat, and then of course the live chat during our podcasts on Sunday nights. If you've been watching us on YouTube and you haven't yet, please subscribe and give us a like. It helps us on that platform. And we appreciate all the support and listenership that we've had during the year, Macca. I noticed before that we got over 1,100. We got over 1,100 chat messages tonight, Macca, which is just amazing. The amount of participation and interaction that we have from our live chatters and our YouTube chatters is just amazing, and it really makes this podcast stand out. With a point of difference. So thanks to everyone who enjoys watching us on a Sunday night. All right, Mac. That's about all we've got.
And that is it.
That is pretty much it. We've got one more before the bye, and we will be taking a break during the bye. So one more next weekend. Hopefully we'll see you all then. In the meantime, take care, stay safe, and we'll see you then. Night, everyone.
Have a good week, folks. See ya.